Blessed be everyone. Hello and welcome to another episode of Black Magic Talk. I'm so excited because today we have, I'm sorry, say your name one more time.
Lothar Tuppan.
Lothar. Okay, yes, Lothar Tuppan. We are going to interview him today. Very excited because this is episode 10. We're on 10 already, guys. I mean,
Nice.
the time is just going so fast, it seemed like just yesterday we were starting, our first episode. Of course, I always have Matt Collins with me.
Evening.
He is my co-host for this lovely program. So let's start right away in the questions. Tell me how you got onto your path. You said you weren't kind of any label, but you just kind of, go with the flow of things.
Yeah, well, I'll explain a little bit more. When we started off talking, just to sort of get a feels like, are you pagan? Are you this? Are you that? I'm a lot of a little different things. So when my first sort of foundational thing is I'm an animist. So I see spirits and everything is alive, and the gods are part of that. The ancestors are part of that. My first path was probably, armchair occultism, like so many of us that, just reading a lot of books and studying a whole lot. At around 30, had some crises in my life and finally decided to get out of the armchair and start learning some stuff. And my first operant path where I was actually trained in something was forms of neo-shamanism, the Harner method that my wife was a part of. I was actually her student at one point, and then we started becoming partners, and we've been together now for over a quarter of a century. I always make the joke that there's a reason why the old Van Halen song "Hot for Teacher" has a warm spot in my heart. But she was my first and best teacher, and still is. She's great that way. And as we were doing work together, there was things that came up, and actually in one of our first sessions, she's like, "Yeah, there's this god Odin, and he kind of wants your attention. You should probably look into that." And I had a lot of relationship with ravens previous to that, but not specifically with Odin. And so I started looking more into that as I was dealing with animism and shamanism, especially neo-shamanism, because the term is an odd term. And at some point we could get into this if you guys are interested, in that the word shamanism doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot. And everybody has this different assumption. It's an academic construct. It goes back to a specific cultural term that doesn't necessarily apply to everything, but everybody has an idea of what shamanism is. And I didn't really know much about it at the time either. So learned more and learned about visionary work, working with spirits, but then I wanted something that was more dynamistic. And by that, I'm using the terms as Edred, the founder of the Rune Guild, did in his PhD thesis, where he made a distinction between animistic magic and dynamistic magic. Where animistic magic, you're working with entities, you're asking them for things, or you're working with them on something, basic petitionary type magic. Dynamistic magic is where you're just working with forces, as if it's like electricity flowing somewhere. And so it's like, yeah, I know how to ask for things, but I want to be able to do some things myself. And so I started trying to look for different ways. And at the same time, I was being trained and initiated into some cultural types. So we had done a number of pilgrimages with the Mayan people in Guatemala and Honduras. And I also studied with a Tibetan shaman. And as all that stuff came up and all this richness of these cultural traditions were there, one thing that kept coming across is, yes, I've been invited. Yes, I'm being respectful, but this is not my ancestry. This is someone else's. And I don't speak their languages. I don't live their life. My teacher in Nepalese shamanism from Tibet, or Nepal, Tibet, the borders changed, but they were actually Nepalese people at the time living in the Tibetan borders, all that stuff. He actually lived half a year in the villages that he trained in, working with them politically, sociopolitically, and was really invested in that culture. And I wanted something that was just as much a part of me. And I wasn't able, or it wasn't part of my path, to adopt into another culture in that way. There was another person I knew who did the same thing with the Lakota Sioux, where he's had to spend a lot of time being treated as an outsider and proving to them that he actually was worthy of being adopted before he could actually be initiated into things. So I started looking at different aspects, and the Germanic aspects of my ancestry is what really started calling to me. And then there's that whole Odin thing again that I had heard about, and tried a lot of different books about rune magic and things like that, but I kept coming back to Edred Thorson's work. Other people had some interesting things to say, but Edred's the stuff I kept coming back to and going, this is what's working. It's practical. It works with me intellectually, emotionally, practically. And after a number of years of being an independent practitioner, in 2003, I applied for initiatory membership in the Rune Guild, um, studied under Alice Karlsdottir, who's a master in the Rune Guild, and have been there since. And I've been a master since 2010, like your last guest, the esteemed Chris Smith, who he got episode 9. He's really lucky because 9's a very important number for Odinic stuff, right? Yeah, I get 10. Great, thanks. Okay.
Well, I have like so many questions running in my head. So let's start with question 1 that actually came up. So you can see spirits.
I can sense spirits. So let's put it this way. Different people, when they say see spirits, I think a lot of times when we're dealing with subtle senses, we translate it into what people can understand. So can I see spirits? Yes, but am I seeing it like the way that I'm seeing the two of you on the screen, or the way I'm seeing this glass of water? No. It's
more of an outline.
It's even more of like, it could be just more of an impression. And then I could lean into that and see some spirits. Or maybe I'm just feeling its presence or hearing something and then opening up my subtle senses. So sometimes it feels like physical stimuli, and other times it's more something completely on the spiritual realm that I would have to translate and say, the spirit talked to me because it got my attention in a way. Did I really hear it in my ears? Not necessarily.
See, I can hear it like in my physical ears.
See, that's another thing. There's a lot of people to where they have a natural gift to where they can see spirits, they can hear spirits, they dream spirits very well. And then there's those of us to where if I had any sort of beginning gift, it was the ability to observe myself, to sort of separate and have that observer self. To where, but that was about the only thing I think I was born with. The rest of the time I had to sort of work at it and learn those skills and work really hard at it, which is good because by learning it, I can maybe help someone else learn it as well. I can help teach it, even though it's a different sort of skill than learning how to play a guitar or, repair an engine. But you can still, if you had to go through the learning process, you can still help them in their own learning process, even though each person's going to be slightly different.
And that's what I want to do. I want to see them as someone else sees them. I don't know. The thing is, when you see something, like I can see, and it's the craziest thing. Sometimes I can see like a gray, like streak. And I think that my ability is getting better, and it's with my physical eyes. Now I can see with my mind's eye or my third eye most of the time. It's just the one spirit. I'd like to physically see him with my physical eyes. Does that make any sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it does. It's for me, I don't put so much importance on that one because it doesn't come easy to me. So it's like, why am I trying for something that's going to be so damn hard?
It doesn't come easy to me either.
Right. A lot of the shamanic work, even though you can actually, especially when you're in an altered state, yes, there are times that you sense and you feel and you do things that are, outside of your normal mode of consciousness when you're in a magical state of consciousness. But a lot of the work that's done in shamanisms, for lack of a better term, is out of body work, to where you're seeing with your mind's eye. And part of what you're training is, because you start off at the point of just imagination. You're just, the first time you pick up a drum or whatever and you're doing it, it's pretty much going to be, unless you're one of those amazing prodigies, you are probably just majority in your head making it up. But you get deeper and deeper, and somehow you get to the other side of that, and all of a sudden things start happening that it's like, wait, that wasn't in my script in my head. Or something else happens, or you get starting phenomenological feedback of like, wow, there's something completely external here that did something. And at that point, you can start going down the role a little bit more. On my masterwork, which is still not unpublished, but it was, on one level, it was about the Kraken, the spirit of, or the entity of the Kraken. I went into the history of it and where it goes back to Norse mythology and stuff, but beyond that, even though that was the focus I was doing on, was tentacular creatures from the ocean that are about fear, was how does anybody deal with the internal spirit, which is your subjective, maybe your own part of your consciousness adding to that spirit, the external transpersonal aspect of that spirit, and then that filter between the two. Because in the same way that my relationship with Matthew is going to be different from your relationship with Matthew, He's still Matthew, but the way that we interact has to do with his personality, my personality, and somewhere between the two, we have a relationship. And it's the same thing with spirits, to where when I see a spirit and it's, possibly hyperdimensional, maybe it's more than, something that lives in three dimensions of space and one dimension of time, I'm going to have to put it into some sort of framework that my mind can encapsulate. And maybe I'll see it through a cultural filter of I'm seeing it as a troll or an elf or whatever goes through my cultural filter as as a Norse practitioner of Germanic magic. Where someone else, if they're coming at it from a Celtic point of view, might see it as the Fae or as something else. And someone from a Native American tradition, especially here in California, maybe the Miwok or the Ohlone, would see it in their cultural filter. So how do we navigate that? And that's, I think, one of the challenges for anybody doing visionary work is being very honest with yourself and figuring out where do I begin and end, and where does the entity that I'm interacting with begin and end, and be clear of that, because it's real easy to slide from true transpersonal work to have an emotional thing that forces you right back into your own garbage, and you're losing that connection and you're back in your own mind again, and it can be challenging. um, yeah, especially one of the nice things about shamanic work is a lot of people don't do this, but my wife and partner and teacher did, was doing sessions for other people. So once a week, at least for a long time, we had people showing up that had a crisis. And a lot of them were coming to us not because they were people who are like, it forces you to up your game. It forces you to really go, I can't, this is not a game. I can't play at this. I have to really give it my best because this person is trusting me with their agony and their suffering. And how do I deal with that? And that, it's scary, it's challenging, it's really, really hard, and at the same time, I don't think there's anything better that gets your skill set better than doing work for other people.
So tell me about the shamanic stuff. I love shamanic beats. It really
Mhm.
relaxes me, puts me in that state of mind.
Yep.
Um, Usually I just find something on YouTube, and then just, when I'm ready to relax and meditate, I just let go. And then it's like I can see pictures like, flash through my, mind's eye or my third eye. It just doesn't happen all the time, or it happens like right
Right.
before I'm ready to fall asleep or something,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
tell me why shamanic, like what made you, I mean, not only fall in love with your wife because obviously she's your partner and your teacher,
Yep.
but why shamanic? why
I
why
wanted
would you even go there?
my first urge, I think, was very superficial. Of This was again the mid to late 90s, and I was in my mid to late 20s at the time, and
But you look
I
so
wanted.
young.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm 56. It's wonderful. The
38.
nice. The 30s are great. Oh my god, the 30s are a great decade. Um, but it was, wanting that attraction of that connection to things directly, and I think that's really it, is wanting a direct connection, wanting to actually feel and experience, not just think about them. And also, my the two ways that a lot of people put this out, and I know that Chris was talking about chaos magic last week when you guys were interviewing him. One of the authors of chaos magic sort of broke this things down. It was Peter Carroll, and he broke down some things in one of his books about like different ways of getting into altered states of consciousness. And one of the distinctions he made was between inhibitory magic and ecstatic magic. And inhibitory magic would be getting into an altered state of consciousness through meditation, long chanting. So, a lot of the Western ceremonial magic type of stuff, to where you're completely controlling your feelings and you're getting in there, and then all of a sudden you get out the other side. For ecstatic magic, it's dance, it's movement, it's maybe even screaming, it's drumming. And for me, my easiest way to get into it, I've learned both ways now and some other ways, but the easiest way for me was ecstatic. It got me out of my own timidness from when I was younger, to where I already put some sort of like, I was always driving a little bit with the brakes on. When you first start to drive, and maybe sometime you're like hovering over the brake, and it's just you're never really driving well. Sometimes you just got to let it go. And so learning to do that through the ecstatic stuff, which was more my speed anyway, that got me there. And so the drumming is really nice. To clarify what I meant earlier about the academic construct, the word shaman was applied by early anthropologists in the 20th century to encompass what they saw as commonalities between different tribal peoples across the world. The word comes from the Evensk-speaking people of the Tungus region in Siberia, of the Saman. But that's a specific spiritual special, or a specific magical specialist. That does not mean that they do the same things of a Lakota medicine man, or a anybody else from different, or the Bombo of the Nepalese people that I studied under as well. There's similarities, but if we reduce them all to that, then we lose what makes them special. And so there's two sort of groups of two camps within shamanic studies, both academically and practitioners. There's one that goes, it's a very helpful term, let's just keep using it, it's not a problem. And the other one's going, yeah, that's fine, but why don't we just use the specific terms of those cultures and acknowledge the similarities, but also focus on the differences? So that's the controversy behind the term. Neo-shamanism started really heavily with Michael Harner and his Foundation of Shamanic Studies. And there's certain core teachings that they do, which they also call core shamanism. Drumming is one of them. I have a lot of good friends in the foundation, and I've worked with the foundation, and they do good work. I have some disagreements of how they have simplified things for their particular branded style of product that they're selling. And I don't mean that in a too bad of a way, but that is kind of what ends up happening. But at the same time, some things they do there very well. One of them is learning how to journey out of body through the use of the drum, like you were just mentioning with the drum beats. When you drum at about 4 beats per second, you start in what they call entrainment with your brain. So your brain waves start matching the rhythm of whatever sound is around them. You can do the same thing with binaural beats. That's another thing people use a lot.
Yep, that's the other thing I use.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And binaural beats are great. I know some people where they don't work, but they do work for me very well. And I've got them on. There's times where at lunchtime at work, if I need to go out and do something and I've got my MP3 player, I can put on some binaural beats and, get it going. But nothing replaces the drum for that type of entrainment. And when you're feeling it, you've got a hoop drum and you're banging on it, you can feel it resonating in your body. So you're getting that somatic feeling as well as just the hearing in your ears. And that can be very, very powerful, especially as you start getting into that altered state and the physical feelings become even stronger. then you start convincing yourself, because if we can convince our bodies that something is happening, if our bodies are telling me that something more than mundane is happening, I'll believe it. That's the difference between a mental hallucination and something that people really experience. It's like you can see all the people to where they have ruined their reputations by saying they've had a UFO encounter, and people go, what did they get out of it? Well, because they honestly believed it. They're talking about the heat they felt from this, or the physical sensations. To them, it wasn't a mental thing, it was a physical experience, and that's what convinces someone that something is real. And I think that's what we do with magic, no matter what our traditions are, is doing a lot of various things to convince all of our different areas that this is something real, and then we get out of our own way and do the magic.
Yeah, I mean, totally. See, sometimes I just like to sit at my desk at work. Now, I'm a computer technician. I rip them apart and put them back together for a living. And there's just times where I just want to listen to those binaural beats and or the shamanic beats. And even when I'm concentrating, I'm still, in the zone, so to speak. Can you talk a little about that? Does that help people if you were more like, if you're focusing on something else, but you're still listening to the beats, would that help someone sort of out of body, as you had put it?
It could. There's a strange sort of focus between the two. So, to me, one of the biggest distinctions is that people talk about the difference between willed magic, where you're really focused on something, or this sort of visionary magic, where you're just sort of opening up and letting things happening to you. And honestly, to do really good visionary work, whether it be something that would fall under shamanic or not, is you have to really walk that line of both. You have to be open to anything else, so you're not controlling everything, but at the same time, you have to be focused on that end goal of why are you here? What's the purpose of this? What's the so what of why we're doing all this? In which case, you want to be focused enough to where you don't just go off into a daydream, because it's like anytime that you're in, like a hypnagogic state where you're thinking about something and then all of a sudden you realize, I'm just thinking about something crazy about fish jumping out of a barrel. Where did that come from? You don't want that to happen when you're doing visionary work, and it can be very easy to do that if you just sort of let it go. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't times that it's just really cool to let that happen and see what see what thoughts pop up. But it would be different for it's a difference between self-exploration and I'm here for a purpose. I got to get something accomplished, and I'm here and I'm interacting with spirits of the client or myself or in the world, and I don't want to waste their time either. So I'm coming for a purpose.
Interesting, because I a lot of my daydreams or my physical dreams, like when I fall asleep, have turned into stories, like mini stories that I've
Oh
written.
yeah. Yeah,
And
that's great.
it's amazing that I can come up with that stuff. And I've been doing it since I was little. I would have, daydreams about like certain movies I had seen,
Hmm.
and then I would just make a story or a daydream out of that with whoever I would had a crush on at the time. Um, so it's interesting that you say that, because I mean that's exactly what I was gonna say. How I've already done that. I've and I have about 30 stories. I haven't
Hmm.
finished them all, but I mean, some
Well,
of them
that's a
are,
great way.
yeah, I mean, some of them have started where my significant other was an FBI agent, and my ex beats me up and stuff, and he has to kind of protect me, but he's also like looking at my friend because someone's using my friend's phone to contact an organization that's not so nice.
Nice.
I don't want to say the word because this will be on YouTube, but um
Beep.
uh so that, yeah. But they're not so nice. They are part of like a Middle East kind of thing,
Yeah. Well,
but
something you're mentioning that's really cool is that one of the side effects, and this is a perfect segue because one of the things that Matthew and I've been talking about is my artistic outlets and bringing both the artistic and the magical side together, and storytelling specifically. But what I have found is that as my visionary skills got better, so were my abilities to just visualize in general, or auralize, or what my wife and I call sensorialize, because there's times where we will do exercises that you couldn't really call them a visualization exercise. It would be because it's working on a different sense. So one of the things that if I'm working on a story, I might plot out, the plot where I've got the characters there, but now I've got a scene and I know what wants to happen in the scene, but I want to experience it because if I can really see it as if it's happening in front of me in my head, the writing is almost effortless. It's when I don't have that it becomes hard. So I have found that the visionary work has made that process easier to where, okay, I've got a scene, I know the characters and stuff. Now I want to see how this scene plays out, and now I can like play with camera angles and stuff and really have it be very vivid as if it's almost happening in front of me because of that skill set. So I think
see, I'm the
that's a
exact
side effect I didn't.
opposite. Yeah, I'm the
Interesting.
exact opposite. I just don't know the words to use because I don't want to like always repeat myself and stuff. I want
Right.
to, and I want, different words to describe different, scenes that I have in my head, or, excuse me. So like the one story that it was supposed to be short, but it's like 500 pages long and I'm still not done with it because I just had like a bunch of ideas come rushing into
Hmm.
my head, from things I've seen, and life experiences, but like I can put myself into a daydream or a vision because again, I've been doing this since I was little and able to just daydream first and then write it down, but
Hmm.
I'm not very good with words.
Well,
So
each
like,
person comes
and
at it
half
from
of
a
the
different
words I
point of
can't
view.
even spell. I'm just like,
Yep.
spell check doesn't even know what the heck I'm doing. I'm
Yep.
like, screw it, I'll use another word.
Well, you're bringing up something which actually ties in a little bit with what we do in the Rune Guild, which is that Edred has a thing that he put in there called the Polarian method, which is kind of one of the things that distinguishes the Rune Guild. On one level, it's we start with the most objective. So you start at it from like, what is the most academically true? You really get that. Then you have some visionary or some subjective experiences. You figure out where's the truth of that, of where's my truth in conjunction with the lore. And then you synthesize those two together, and that becomes your practice. Another aspect of that, which ties in more with what we're talking about right now, is bringing in opposites. So Polarian, he means by opposite poles. So we got fire and ice that created the world. And that was the first two, tensions that created everything in between. Well, within the guild, we have a very strong distinction between the people that come to us from academia that want to learn magic. So they really are into studying the, they can, speak multiple languages, and they can read the original text, and they can, get a PhD in this subject, and they have to up their magical game. So the for them to become a whole person, they've already got that academic stuff down. Now bring up that subjective magical stuff, bring it together and become, a rune gilder. The other side is that, for people like me, where I came at it more from the magical side, I've always loved learning. I've always been, a geek about this stuff. I don't think I'm unintelligent, but for various personal reasons, I have never, completed degrees and followed that path. So this was perfect for me because I had suddenly a school that I could be a part of and really adopted that. So I, very much go into that. From the artistic side, and this is something I've been advocating for within the Rune Guild for people who have artistic inclinations, is if you are that natural, intuitive artist that can come up with things and do it well, now you're going to need to really learn the craft more, the structures, the theories, the what works and what doesn't work, what are all the things that people have run into walls instead of just letting it go loosey goosey. To use a musical experience, there's people that could be, wow, I played in a really good punk band and that's great, but maybe at some point you want to learn some music theory, you want to do something a little bit different and not play the same stuff you played when you're 18, when you're 30, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with the letting it all go and doing it DIY and having a good ecstatic time to bring that ecstatic stuff back in. But if that's all you can do, then you're limiting yourself. And none of us as magicians should limit ourselves. We should always expand, always become more. And so if I'm already doing this here, but I'm not doing this as good, I need to bring that up just for myself. And so that's where I would see for myself, it's like, okay, I had the intellectual stuff. I needed to get more into the let unexpected things happen. For you, maybe it's the opposite. And every person's like that. And I think that's one of the things that's nice about any good magical school and any good artistic school. And I don't think the two are very different because we do call them the mystic arts and the magical arts and things like that, is being able to allow a student to find their own uh, what is right for them and what their own strengths are. One of the things that Edward always used as a metaphor is that we are becoming who we are. And a acorn will never give birth to an apple tree. It'll only give birth to an oak tree. So learn very early on in your practice, what are you actually? And become the best tree that you are, whatever your seed is. And my seed isn't going to be the same as one of my students' seed. But if we can help identify that, then I can just help give them the space and the support to grow into the tree that they need to become. And that's true for artists, for magicians, for hopefully for academics too, where, some people would be like, oh, I went into this graduate program, but if they have the right mentor, the right advisor, they might go in a path that they didn't even know was right for them. And at the end of going like, how could I have been anything else? But without the right environment, they may not have ever gotten there.
I'm starting to see what you're talking about. It's almost like you were put here for a reason. Thank you, Matt. Because the burning question on my tongue is, do you offer classes?
Yes, I don't do much external work anymore. When I first was becoming what we call the elder fellow stage, which is we've got three structures. It's a guild structure. So we've got basically the versions of an apprentice, a journeyman, and a master. But using academic terms and some other linguistic Germanic terms, Edward chose the terms learner, fellow, and master. So at the fellow stage is the most fun because you've already, you're not working directly under a master anymore, and you're sort of flowing about. And then at some point you get the call to become a master, to work a little bit harder at that and to start teaching. That's one of the calls. And so you start trying to build a community around you. And so I would give around 2007 to 2011, I did a lot of open workshops for people, open heathen religious events that we would then, do some other runic work as well. And then started a runa workshop, which is where you start having external people that are working with the Rune Guild, but not as members. And then that turned into my hall. So in 2009, 2010, I raised our hall here, which is just basically saying, it's kind of like starting a coven or starting any magical group. We just call them halls. And was running that for a number of years, handed over the reins to my wife, who's now the leader of the hall. She's a master as well in the Rune Guild. And so we have our group of people. So we do a lot of internal stuff. We teach each other things. There might be times where I might feel the call again to open up to more public stuff and see if I can do more outreach that way. But it can be exhausting to do outreach, and it can also be exhausting to always do those beginning classes. It's like, oh, we're doing runes 101 again. That's great. Thanks. It's important. It's good work to do. But if that's all you're doing, or you're trying to fill up your class or your time with like, I'm so important, I got people booked for every class for the next 3 weekends, and I'm not doing any deep work on my own because all I'm doing is focusing on teaching the basics. Not a problem. But if you do too much of that, it can be a trap it's hard to get out of.
What about something specific? Like if I came to you and said, I would like to take, classes on seeing spirits or sensing them. Your reply would be,
If I had time, I would be open to it. Especially if someone's local, doing things distant and remote. Certain things I can do, certain things, especially if I create a personal relationship with a student, then that is not as much of a barrier. But with certain things, if I couldn't do it in person, wouldn't want to waste anybody's time. And the other thing is, I just, as Matthew knows, I'm far too busy with way too many projects right now. So it's like I need to stop taking things on and clean some things off my plate at this point.
yeah. I mean, yeah, this week I'm working open to close. That's why I thought maybe we should do it at 8:30, but I mean, I really don't have to go to bed till midnight, but usually this is like my night where I stay up till like 2 a.m. and I don't have to
Right.
go to bed till 2 a.m.
Nice.
Except that, my boss is on vacation because it's his birthday this week.
Oh,
Sometime this
nice.
week. He never told me, but it's
Yeah.
just he took off for the whole week. And of course, like I said, I do tear computers apart and put them back together.
My day job is a system analyst for electronic medical record system at a hospital. So yeah, we just had a go live, so we're doing the IT go live thing right now. It's
I just had
I love my job, but it's very different from my passions and my calling.
It is, yeah, and it's sort of, well, I mean, it's different than my shows. So, my shows are either pro wrestling or, of course, my religion, which is I'm Wiccan. So,
Hmm.
I totally get that. And sometimes it's hard to, separate them, especially when,
Hmm.
someone came to me and was like, "Oh no, a witch is working on my computer." I was like, "Well, I'm a good witch if that helps." I don't mean any harm, and I won't put any weird things on your computer. Um, but all kidding aside, it's just uh, because I've also taken on so much. Like I said, I have 3
Hmm.
shows, plus I work full time and I'm a mom.
That's it. That's it.
um,
Yep.
I mean, it is time consuming, and I have been meaning to. Is there someone very special that I want to see and contact? And Matt knows
Mhm.
what I'm talking about. It would just be nice if I could, and I'm gonna work at it. I know
Mhm.
I gotta keep working at it. I told him the other day. I told my husband that it's like a muscle. You have to work it. And,
Mhm.
if you're
Yep.
gonna build up your muscs, you
Mhm.
have to work at it. And I know I do. It just sometimes I'm just so exhausted. I'm just like,
Yep.
get me. I want to go
Well,
to sleep.
one thing I will say is, cross culturally, one of the common things, and this is true of the Germanic traditions and a lot of the European ones as well, is the Afro Caribbean and some other ones, is the altar to the ancestors. If you're talking about someone who might have passed on, um, then you know offerings to the ancestors, whoever it is you want to do it at an altar area, makes things stronger. And then it's like, you can do that, every day, once a week. Offer water, offer liquor, offer their favorite foods, talk to them, burn some incense, and you make it stronger and stronger and stronger. And then when you do have the time to do more deep ritual work, it's kind of like, one of the things I always say about animism is that it's not that much different than the relationships we have here in meat space. Um, and the same rules apply to some degree. Um, Even in the same way that, like, I have friends to where I know there's certain things that I can act in a certain way to them, and they will be fine with that. And then there's times where I need to be more respectful or not do that sort of thing. And so you learn those rules. And it's like, yeah, there's rules within the spirit world that are different than the mortal world, but basically it's like show respect, spend time with them. One of the cautions I always make about animistic work is that it's a whole lot of work, because when I'm just doing work myself dynamistically, I'm done with my ritual. My responsibility is done. If I have a relationship with 10 spirits I work with, strongly, that's 10 friends I have to keep in contact with and not forget about. And just think about the times that, you got a good friend and they stop calling you, but they call you up every few months and they ask you for something. And you're like, oh God, you're just using me again. Why don't you just call me to talk? Why don't you just call me to tell me how your day was? But no, you got to like come and ask me for a favor. That's an unhealthy relationship we can get into with the spirits. So one of the common things would just be like, the way we send out emails to a friend, like, hey, I was just thinking about you. I saw this show and it made me think of you. Maybe you'll like it too. Whatever it is, whatever the relationship is, having that going on at your spirit altar can be a really wonderful thing. And then you might start noticing little things like, oh, I smelled something that reminded me of that person or whatever it is. And they're here. Even though I can't see them, I can feel them here. I know they're here with me right now.
I did
I'm
that
not
with my
alone.
grandmother when I was at
There you
my
go.
really first job.
Yep.
Like it was on as if she was like touching my wrist. I smelled her perfume.
Yep.
And my grandmother passed in 99, and this was 2006.
Yep.
So it had been a while, and it literally all I would go like that, and I'm like, that's my grandmother's perfume, because I
Yep.
know she wore this specific perfume.
See,
It
and
was
how
so
beautiful
weird.
is that? That's like, and
It
yes,
was. It
I
was
would
really
lo
beautiful.
I had a really strong relationship with my grandmother too, and she's one of, the people that I talk to a lot. We've got an ancestral mound. So instead of an altar, we've got a mound outside. Just sort of an ancestral grave. We did sort of put a lot of different objects in there. But
I need to go
while I
see
would
her.
love to see her again, the times that I get a smell, or a memory comes up very strong to where I know it was given to me by that, makes it even almost more sublime and beautiful in a way. So, um, those are beautiful things as well, and that's really cool that your grandmother came to you that time.
Well, it's because, and I don't like to tell a lot of people this, but I've been working on myself with my husband and soulmate
Mhm.
so much that I'm starting to feel more comfortable with it now. My mother was very abusive, sometimes physically and mostly mentally. And after, excuse me, after my grandmother passed, it got worse.
Oh,
So I think my grandmother knew that, and there it happened. There's a story that happened where my grandmother, excuse me, had a summer home, and I was there for a weekend. It was like I wouldn't be going back to school till I was Labor Day, I think. So I could like stay with her Monday if I wanted to.
right.
And she said, "You want to go home?" This was Sunday. "You want to go home?" And I said, "No, I really don't want to, Grandma." She said, "What, you know, why not?" And I was like, "Just can we stay one more day?" And my mom was livid. Let's just say that her and my grandmother had a huge fight, but it
Mhm.
but my grandmother never ratted me out and said, "Your daughter doesn't want to come home and she doesn't, you know, it was just my grandmother wanted to protect me." But then again, like I said, after she passed, unfortunately, a lot of the abuse got worse. And I think sometimes my grandmother might feel guilty um because she wasn't there for me, and that's maybe why she brought my soulmate into my life.
Yep.
Because without my soulmate, I don't know where I'd be right now.
Yeah.
He's amazing. I couldn't have picked a better man for myself.
Perfect.
So I do say he's perfect.
Nice.
No, I mean, he is perfect to me, even though, we all have
Yeah.
flaws. But and that's why I kind of said to you at the beginning, I'm like, I always get like angry, and then I'm like, sorry, why did I show that emotion in front of him? Um, and he's always like, stop apologizing because you're angry at something.
Yeah.
Like today, I was working on a computer and I forgot to put a hard drive in. I'm like, I gotta open this stupid thing up again. So I was more mad at myself, because I know how to do all that stuff. And then something wasn't working right, so I had to find a workaround. And then I'm like, I gotta remember the stuff that I've forgotten more stuff about DOS commands than I could ever tell you that I've remembered. So I had to look it up, and I'm just like, oh, come on, why didn't I remember that? And so I was
Yeah.
mad at myself for not that, you know. So I think like my grandmother will come into my dreams, but lately I've been dreaming more about my soulmate,
Nice.
because he's just always on my mind. And um I mean, we have a great relationship, and it's something I never had in my life. My son's father would probably attest to that.
Right.
But I mean, um, is there a way to see? I always
Well,
feel like if I call her to me, I'm invading her space or whatever.
I would well, a couple of things. One, before anybody should do animistic work strongly with other spirits, they need a spirit ally, someone who's gonna watch out for you in that realm. And more often than not, that is probably going to be a family member who has passed on, someone in the ancestral realm. Those are the first ones that most cultures will recommend doing because our family, especially if it's someone that we know specifically, but there's all sorts of weird cleansing that can happen on the other side, and you certainly don't want to have a relationship with someone dead who is toxic. If you didn't want to have them in that relationship in this life, you certainly don't want them there either. And Terence McKenna had a great quote saying, just because someone's dead doesn't make them wise. Um, we suddenly think, oh, you're in the spirit world and you can do everything. No, you can still be a jerk. You go to like, I wouldn't go to my dad who's passed for spiritual advice. I would go to him for business advice. I would go to him for acting advice. I wouldn't, so I just know that sort of thing. Grandparents especially are wonderful because they really, the relationship between grandparent and grandchild is so nurturing, usually, and so wonderful that they're perfect helpers, and they want to help. So it's like, oh yeah, here you go. Now I know that she's okay. There's this person in her life who is right for her. They're going great. That's great. I don't have to worry. That doesn't mean she doesn't want to hear from you anymore. Doesn't even mean that she doesn't necessarily want your advice. One of the metaphors I always use with Odin, because in the Rune Guild we consider ourselves to be Odians instead of Odinists. Odinists worship Odin. Odians emulate Odin. And while that can be a weird academic distinction, to me, it makes a very simple distinction, or a simple understanding of, if I'm growing up underneath a parent and I always stay in the role of, Daddy, what do I do? Am I okay, Daddy? Can you help me out, Daddy? Well, they're going to think, why aren't you just growing up? You're not standing on your own. But if I do everything that I can and I become strong, and then I say, "Hey, Dad, I've done X, Y, and Z, and I'm kind of confused about this. Can you give me some advice?" Oh my God, as a parent, of course that's what we want. It's like, yes, you're coming to me for something, but I've seen you've done a lot. I'm proud of you, and you still want me. We're working on it together. And especially in the spiritual realm with the Rune Guild, it feels like trying to grow up and say, I want to be part of the family business. You know, I want to work with you towards a common goal. And so I think even when we deal with ancestral spirits like your grandmother or someone else, it's like working with them, moving forward. Uh, she doesn't have to worry about you, but she probably still wants to like hang out with you. And if there's times you do ask her for things, it's not too bad. My
Well,
grandmother
that
would probably love to make me a crappy thing of canned corned beef hash if she could. Yeah.
well, that and my he would have been my father-in-law, who he has passed. Um, I didn't think he was gonna like me at first, but he does, because I take care of his son,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
love his son wholeheartedly. So I mean, but it was nerve wracking at first. I'm like, "Ugh." But I mean, he's in the spirit world, and I know that my husband talks to him from time
Yeah.
to
And
time.
don't underestimate the power of oaths to bind family. Um, there's a lot of us to where we have family that are family of oaths, to where we've sworn allegiance, and that becomes to the right people. That can be just as powerful as blood. Sometimes it can even be more so. There's some things in some of the Norse sagas to where a father and son, or a brother and another brother, end up fighting because they've sworn allegiances to other sides, and the oath is more important than the blood. They're brought up as almost like cautionary tales of like not a definite right or wrong, but a like, here's a hard situation. Like anything in fiction, sometimes it just shows us the human condition and gives us a way to wrestle with the harder questions of how do we live, how do we die, and how do we treat everybody in between.
Or you don't even have to go fiction. You can just go real, like the Civil War, which was a brother
Oh, sure.
versus
Yeah.
brother or
Yeah.
father versus son war,
Yep.
especially the American Civil War. Um, and to not to toot my own horn, but I live in Pennsylvania, so I live about 2 hours west of Philly, excuse
Hmm.
me, which is the Revolutionary War starting. And then I also live an hour southeast of Gettysburg.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's a
Yep.
major battle in the Civil
Oh, yeah.
War,
Absolutely.
and um, I I would love to go ghost hunting there. I'm not gonna lie. But I mean, I know Gettysburg like the back of my hand because and it's from watching a lot of the camp rangers that or the rangers there from the park, and they just have I mean, they know where the troops were and they could tell you word for word what happened because they had those diaries, and you have to be an historian basically in State Massacre.
Yep.
So Jimmy Clark, I think, was the one haunting him supposedly. But sorry, I didn't mean to put all that history on you, but I mean,
I love
um
history.
yeah, I love history too, especially like I said, my favorite war to learn about is always the Revolutionary War. My dad is kind of like the Civil War buff. But I was telling Matt this one time, I actually had a teacher. He wasn't my teacher, but I had a teacher in my middle school who was actually a reenactor at
Oh,
Gettysburg.
cool. Nice.
So, and I didn't last very long. And watching Glory, if have you ever seen the movie
Oh, yeah.
Glory?
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't last very long when they're holding that guy down. I was just
Yeah.
like, I gotta go.
Yep.
I know that's how hospitals were then, but I mean, ugh.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I have talked enough. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Word.
talk too much of your time. Matt, if you want to take it from here, we have at least 10 minutes. You can have 10, 15 if you want.
I'm good until you guys are done. So
Sure, that was great. I did want to bring up Screaming Eye Press and your
oh yeah.
work with, yeah, what you're working on right now.
So it's great. My two passions in life have always been wanting to learn magic and wanting to be a storyteller in various media. So I've been an oral storyteller since 1998. Um, I became a voice actor in modern audio drama, which is like the old time radio shows, but there was a resurgence that happened in the internet in the mid 2000s. And around 2008, 2009, I came across that and started just falling in love with it because I love that medium and have since I was a little kid. And started acting around 2009, 2010 as a voice actor, taking my storytelling stuff and applying it there. And around the same time, started doing my own production, apprenticed with one group to where it was sort of like a lot of DIY community. So it's like, yeah, we'll teach you how to do this, but you're going to work on some shows for us, right? So it's like I took a class and then I gave basically a year's worth of free labor on working on some of their shows, working on my own stuff. I've always been a writer since I was a teenager and still getting better at that. So writing scripts, I wanted to be a comic book writer when I was in my 20s. For good and bad reasons, that didn't happen. And now at Screaming Eye Press, we did actually my partners at Screaming Eye Press, but through Bear Manor Media, we just did a book of interviews of Marvel Comics creators from the Bronze Age called The Marvelous Bronze Age. And one of the things I learned through that process is, oh my God, that's a horrible industry. I'm really glad I didn't become a part of that and try and raise a family doing that and other things. It's great from one level, but certainly in other areas not. Um, so I started producing my own audio dramas and doing that a lot. And then around the pandemic, one of my audio drama partners, Mark Slade, who has produced his own audio dramas, and I worked with him on a show that we co-wrote together. He's like, so the guy Chauncey and I, we wanted to start a magazine. Do you have anything to contribute? And I went, yeah, I think I do actually. And then he's like, well, we need someone who can help edit. And I'm like, well, I used to work as a word processor and editor and proofreader. So I got sort of co-opted into that. We started making Twisted Pulp magazine, which was a spinoff of the Twisted Pulp Radio Hour, which was sort of like an anthology of various audio dramas that were playing in the Redding area of California. And then Twisted Pulp magazine turned into other books. So we've done a collection of short stories. So we've got Born Under a Bad Sign 1 and 2, which is a bunch of crime stories in the style of Jim Thompson. I've got some stories in there and edited those. We also did a book called Rumble, which is a takeoff of the old Men's Adventure magazines from the 50s and 60s, and playing around with some of that stuff, and just had a hoot doing some really silly stories in that. We did a book recently called Horrible Little Stories. So in response to certain people wanting to censor Roald Dahl's children's books because they were no longer politically correct, and I'm a big First Amendment right guy. It's like so I'm also a big follower of the organization The Fire, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They used to be the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and they focused on public schools and their First Amendment rights on campus. Now they've expanded it. And so we collected a bunch of stories, some by actually some really large authors like Joe Lansdale, who did maybe most famously for people, the person who wrote the story that became the movie Bubba Hotep. Richard Christian Matheson, who's the son of Richard Matheson, he contributed some stories. Elizabeth Massey, who now writes a lot of young adult stuff, but in the 90s did some incredibly brutal splatterpunk. So we put all those together. Some of the stories are about the First Amendment, but most of them are ones that will just be very extreme. Our subtitle that my partner Mark Slade came up with: no trigger warnings, just spikes through the mind. So we, I think one of our best reviews on Amazon is a 1-star rating saying there is absolutely nothing redeeming in this book whatsoever. I'm like, okay, I like that. Thank you very much. But so, doing a lot of different things like that. I've written a lot of different short stories, done a lot of different audio dramas. I've done some oral recordings of oral stories done in the oral storytelling manner that are now up on YouTube, but recorded, but still practiced and performed as if it was an oral story as opposed to a scripted story. Yeah, so a lot of different stuff. I'm working on a couple of things now that are finally going to bring a little bit more of my Norse spirituality into the overt. But then, as Matthew knows also, I've also done some things which has been embedding magical techniques into the artwork itself so that the art is a magical working in and of itself. Closest thing I could say would be like what Grant Morrison has done with the Invisibles as what he would call a hyper sigil in the comic book medium, but different techniques, but a similar sort of thing to where there's ritual practices in making the art, and then at the end, the art itself is a working or a spell, for lack of a better term, that when interacting with it, the magic will be released. And I try and do that for positive purposes, not to take over the world. So
that's a shame. No, I'm only kidding. I was actually listening to a podcast you did on Fun Ideas, number 247, earlier this year. And you were talking about the fragility of our own memories, how people can remember the same event in very different ways.
Can you repeat that? You blacked out on me for a second. I didn't hear the full sentence. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I was listening to Fun Ideas podcast number 247, which you did this year with a couple of your friends who I think you just mentioned.
Oh, right. Yes. Uh-huh.
And you were talking about the fragility of memories and how two people can remember the same event in two different ways. So I was wondering how that would tie in with like maybe something like the Mandela effect.
I don't know too much about that, but one of the things that's come up with a lot of people doing cognitive studies is that when we're remembering something, it is not like what we've done with magnetic storage to where we are, have some data that's on a hard drive and we just run the little magnet over it and pull it back up as it is. What we are doing whenever we remember something, we're actually recreating it in our minds. A neuroscientist could go into more of the details of that, but it's along the lines of like you're recreating neural memories, or neural pathways, and you're re-embedding. It's almost like you're rewriting that memory into your brain. And as time goes on, one of the things that'll happen is that our memories will shift. And my memories now of what happened to me, some traumatic things that happened to me in my teenage years, to me, they feel like honest memories, but more often than not, if I was able to go back to that time period or talk to myself, I would have very different memories. And that's one of the things they talk about, the fragility of memory. It can also be one of the things that happens during therapy is people realizing that their bad habits and their self-loathing or something can create even worse memories than what was really there and create traumatic stuff that they could reframe. This is where we get into some of the things with certain types of postmodern magic, where people will do what they call retro retrocausation or retro enchantment, to where you recreate a memory in the past, and if you do it strong enough, it's almost like you've gone back and changed the past. So I'm going to go back to this very bad memory and make it very vivid and work really hard with it to where I vanquished the challenge as opposed to fell under it, or failed but not in the way that it did, some way that makes sense, some way that feels real, and then take that into the present as if that was the past, and walking again that fine line of not falling into delusion, and truly believing that that's the case, but playing that game, that psychological game, to get yourself to where you need to be. But yeah, I mean, I think it's something that people see all the time, especially if you're in relationship with someone where really strong relationship, where you realize we were both there at that same event and my memory is not exactly the same as yours. There is a lot of overlap, but then there's times where I remembered something differently, or you remembered something differently, or who knows. Yeah.
And so, how does that tie in with speaking of ravens, Odin's ravens?
Well, I always wondered, that one was, there's so much about the people talking about Hugin and Munin, which are the two of Odin's ravens. Hugin means, it's a variation of the same word that is Hugr, which is the mental capacity. And then Munin, which is the same as, like, close to like Mimir and other aspects of the soul complex, which is about memory. And Odin has there's a poem in the Poetic Edda which talks about how Odin fears more for, both his ravens fly away and they come back. And yes, he fears for Hugin, but he fears for Munin more. And it's a metaphor to say he fears for memory loss more than for the other one. And one of the things which a lot of academics and magicians do is they talk about the importance of the past, the importance of remembering things properly, the importance of not letting the past be forgotten. And I completely agree with that. But I think we're ignoring the elephant in the room if we emphasize that too much, which is that all of us, and I think probably even the poets of the, of the oral cultures, to where as they're getting older and their memory is starting to slip and moving into what we would now maybe call dementia or senility or something worse, that's the memory we fear, because then we lose ourselves. And that's a terrifying thing. I think that's a terrifying thing for a lot of different people on a magical path, is that if my mind and my soul and my thoughts and all of those non-physical things I want to have live on after me, and I want to be powerful, but if in the last 5 or 10 years of my life I don't even know who I am anymore, well, what do I do with that? What's left? What doesn't? And these are hard questions.
That's beautiful. Well, yeah, I think that's all I got. Honestly, it was amazing. I'm just,
Right on.
Yeah, my mind is filled with so many thoughts.
This was fun. Thanks for inviting me. This was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have to have you back on, because I'm really interested in, definitely, well, I gotta
everything you
sit
said.
down and, yeah, pretty much everything you said. I mean, Matt and I were just talking about like the First Amendment and stuff, and what we think the elites are up to at this point. Yeah, I mean, we definitely have to have you back on, because I'm interested in, when you do kind of have some free time, maybe we could work together and make that muscle for me better, because
Sure.
it would be so wonderful to see physically the person I want to see. There's someone who is physically living who is bothering the crap out of me, and I don't want anything to do with him. And I've tried everything I know how to block him, and I just still can't block him. He just come to my apartment. No, I'm not coming to your apartment. I don't want anything to do with you. In fact,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just, that's one of the same way that you need a good, strong, one needs a good, strong spiritual ally before working with other spirits. It's also to be able to turn it off and to close, basically say, yeah, that's great. Now I'm closing the door. You're going to leave now, and we're locking the door, and you're going to go. And sometimes in this overly materialistic world where we're struggling so hard to have those spiritual connections, those intuitive connections, those visionary connections, we're working so hard to get there that we can inadvertently open up all the windows and doors in our house, invite everybody in, and all of a sudden, like, why short horror shows that have plenty of that on it. So yeah, I don't think your AI algorithms are working the way you want it to, YouTube.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, but if I could get a hold of her, and I do want to talk to her because she was a good aunt.
Yeah.
What I want to do is just focus on, my soulmate and the telepathic stuff that we're spiritually learning, and everything spiritually that we're learning,
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Then, maybe asking them for, like, how do I help provide me, whether they can teach you or just maybe point you in the right way of how to, what's right for you to be able to close down certain avenues to where it's like you want to be able to have that circuit open, but this one closed. And how do you do that? Because that can be really hard. It's like those are, and that's where it's hard to teach because it's not like a physical skill. So each person's way of doing it is going to be a little bit different, and each person's way of finding true success with that is going to be a little bit different. But the basic idea of, like, okay, yeah, I can juggle. Once I can juggle enough balls in the air, then I can do something else, and that's hard. It's hard to get to that point, and that's where it's like I want this open and this closed at the same time. Well, first we start off going, well, I'm closed and I want to be open. Now I'm open to everything. How do I start, being a
Closing
little
the
bit
things
more?
that are
Yeah,
not good for me. And I've
exactly.
done that with Hecate,
Mhm,
because I've been asking her for things, help with finances, help with um, spiritual things. In fact, she actually helped me to open myself up to physically hearing with my ears. So, like hearing a
mhm.
spirit. So not only that, but I also am an avid ghost hunter,
Great.
and I have some EVPs that I was shocked when I heard them, like
Mhm.
completely shocked. And I have recorders
Nice.
that I use. But I mean, when I first heard the several EVPs, I was I was completely shocked. I was like,
Yep.
I was, it was like magnifique. Very shocked and surprised because I was always told, oh well, I grew up Methodist, and then I just kind of rebelled because I've always been fascinated by magic.
Mhm.
I had an old spell book. I think I was telling Matt this, that I had an old spell book, and I think my mom found it and destroyed it. But I would actually look through the pages and be like, "Oh, I'd love to do that. Oh, I'd like to do that one
Yep.
too." You know.
Yep.
Um, so I think it was like always, and I've had several dreams where I've been reincarnated.
Mhm.
Like I would delete in a different way, or someone would delete me in a different way, and literally I would just come right back to Earth.
Interesting. Yep.
So yeah, I know. I woke up going, "Hey, what was that?" And I dream in color, which is really cool. Like, for example, I dreamt the other night that I was in school and my soulmate was also in school. But I mean, my soulmate is uh, 66. He just turned 66. And I'm 38. So we were in school at the same time.
Yep. Yep.
But like we were at school and there was a kid that was bullying me or something, and I stood up to him and said, "You're not gonna act like this towards me," or something like
Right.
that. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that I still dream about school sometimes, but I don't dream of my high school, the high school I went to, or the school I went to anymore.
Right. Yeah, and which comes to where is it really memory or is it something else that is working its way through the story that you're weaving in your own head? What's the emotional truth? What's the spiritual truth? And I think a lot of times when it comes to dream interpretations or dream events, or even visionary ones, people focus sometimes too much on the plot of this happened and this happened at this place and these things when this is coming out of some mixture of our own unconscious, the collective unconscious, spiritual messages that are coming through a weird filter in our own brain, and we're asleep at the time dreaming.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not going to be photorealistic memories. It's going to be something else, and focusing on what is the core emotional truth? What are the themes? What are the characters? What is the meaning of this? When you walk away from a movie and go, why did I watch that? Well, maybe there's some actual deeper meaning there. And so, learning to blur the specifics, but what's the core that's coming out? When you're mentioning that you were dreaming more about your soulmate as opposed to your grandmother, well, that's a nice thing to where it's like, okay, that you can almost see the handoff. You can see her almost like putting his hand in yours and patting you on the back as you both walk away and smiling at you, knowing that you're happy, and that you're living a nice life. And now you've got something else going.
Sometimes, other times it's very sexual.
Sure, sure, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, again, not the specifics, but just like, okay, what did we get? We got the emotion of your grandmother being there for you, and now your soulmate romantic partner is there for you in all the ways that you want that to be. What happened there? There was something. You said that you thought that your grandmother might have brought him into your life.
Oh, I know she did.
Right. So that's the stuff to hold on to in that example. That's just an example of, like, again, get through the clutter of the imagery to what's behind it. What's really coming up. Yeah.
Well, see, that's funny because I watch a lot of documentaries, and I can't tell you how many dreams I've had about this. I watch a lot of documentaries. I love science,
Mm-hmm.
mostly astronomy, but I also like weather, and
Mm-hmm.
I love learning about tornadoes. And I can't tell you how many dreams I've had about tornadoes.
Yeah.
Seeing them, running away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my soulmate and I got taken up into, like, not taken up, but it's kind of like that movie, like the end in Twister when they're
Oh, right. Yeah.
dangling, their legs are up in the air and they
Mm-hmm.
actually see the inside of the tornado, which again you couldn't, that it's not possible because you would probably be deleted by
Right.
debris smacking
Right.
into you.
Yeah.
And my soulmate is very he's very smart. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, like, he always says, I'm so smart, because, I do want to learn a lot about tornadoes and I want to learn about astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I watch the show How the Universe Works.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I've seen all kinds of documentaries about, how tornadoes, some people, I mean, we don't know how they form because not one supercell is like the other. You could have two identical supercells, and here I go with the science stuff again. If it's not history, it's science. So you could have two different supercell, or the same. You could have two
Mm-hmm.
identical supercells. One will produce a tornado and the other one won't. Well,
Right.
scientists are kind of baffled by this because we're not really sure, like, I'm a scientist, but they're not really sure how one will form. I mean, the things have to be right. And there
Mm-hmm.
was one gentleman, Tim Samaras, who would put these discs and stuff in the path of one, and they got some great things, and then he was deleted in the El Reno tornado in 2003. Sorry,
Gotcha.
2013, excuse me,
Hmm.
which was one of the biggest, it was the largest tornado ever recorded on Earth. It was 2.6 miles.
Oh,
It
wow.
was only an EF4, but still, it didn't have a lot of destruction because El Reno, you have to understand, is a lot of farm and
Mm-hmm.
meadow area. Um, and I would love to be a storm chaser. I would do it for the science, not the thrill, because I'm not really a
Sure.
thrill seeker. But I would love to know, yeah, why does one supercell bring a tornado and the other one won't, even if they're
Sure.
identical?
Right.
So I mean, and I follow people like Reed Timmer, who is he's a not an archaeologist. Sorry, he's a weather guy. Let's just say he's a
Meteorologist.
meteorologist. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, meteorologist. And he does follow these storms all over the place. In fact, he was a hero. Actually saved a guy's life when his semi tipped over,
Mm-hmm.
and he went and just, like, didn't even think about it, just went and helped the guy. um I mean, I could do that. It's just I would be and like I said, the meaning, even if you look at the meaning of a tornado in real life, it's
Mm-hmm.
destructive. or destruction.
But
So
there's
in
power, there's force, there's elements there. There's all sorts of
winds,
things that would be
yeah.
that would be attractive. I've known surfers that have been, living here on the California coast that have, been absolutely fascinated with waves and, all that. So it's like, yeah, you dream a lot about tornadoes, you're fascinated with them, explore that spiritually as well as, scientifically.
And that's funny you say that, because I used to dream about tsunamis. And I'm not interested in tsunamis at all. But every time I would go to the beach, or I would be at the beach or something within a dream, it would literally be a tsunami. And
Yep.
that terrifies me. But I mean, I guess that's my own fear coming out there. But because I wouldn't want to be at the beach and have like a tsunami happen. I'm very afraid of that happening. I guess I'm not afraid anymore because I've stopped. It's more
Yeah.
tornadoes, but I don't find tornadoes scary. I just find them fascinating because it's
Mhm.
like how do you form? What is your deal? Why do you only come around in like March, April, May, June, July, and August? And then there's also a second season now, like November, October, November, but you have to be in like Tornado Alley for that.
Right.
Because they don't
Well,
get a lot of snow.
something I'll throw out there, and then I'm looking at the time, and I do have to get going. But
Yeah, me too. I'm sorry.
yeah, no worries. There's a lot of people who think that certain types of elements or destructive forces that come out, it's less about them and more about the emotional state that you're in. Like I know there's some people to where they might dream about water, a pipe breaking in their house, and they have to deal with that in their dream, or fire or something. And it has less to do about that and more to do with their emotional state. So once they identify that, they get a personal language of their dreams of when this happens, it means this. For me, one of the things that always happen in dreams is if I'm not sure about my path and I don't know what decision I'm making and I'm not quite clear about that, I will have dreams of not being able to find my car in a parking lot. Because for
Mm.
me, cars are a powerful symbol of autonomy, of power, of movement. It's, very much an extension of the horse in Indo-European cultures to where it is, a part of us achieving our own sovereignty in our lives. So when I don't know
Mhm.
exactly where I'm going, I can't find my car. It has nothing to do with the car. It has to do with what does the car symbolize to me. So I'll just throw that out there
Interesting.
for people to think about, what do you guys dream about a lot of, especially ones that are emotionally charged, and what does that symbol mean to you as opposed to what is the symbol externally? And that's
Well, I
something
go
for people to
shopping
think
and I
about.
can't find I see the thing I want, but then I walk away and then I come back, I can't find that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be
I guess
something
I see
that'd
that
be an
as a
interesting thing
power
to,
thing.
or something else. But journaling would be a really good way to maybe triggering on something going like, oh wait, I just wrote something I didn't know, and that seems to resonate. So
Well, very insightful, and we definitely have to have you back. I really enjoyed. I
thank you.
mean, this time went way too fast.
Yeah.
But we definitely will have you back. I know Matt. We really enjoyed you. Nothing but laughter, and like that. That always makes the time go fast, anyway.
Absolutely.
So, I like everyone to, have a good week, and take everything that, um, Sir Tuppan has said. I know you're not knighted, but you are in my eyes. I
Thank
knight
you.
you now. uh, and we definitely, I cannot wait to have you back, to be
Thank
honest.
you. Right on.
Matt, who do we have on next week? I'm sorry.
Next week, we've got Victoria Redbard,
Victoria
Australia's
Redbard.
leading sexuality expert.
Oh my.
Cool.
She'll be able to help me because I have a lot of sexual dreams, I'll tell you what. And no filter, apparently. Ask my soulmate, he knows. We've done things. But I would like to thank everybody for listening, and if you could hit that like button and subscribe if you like what you hear, or follow us on Rumble. We just got 11 subscribers on Rumble. I'm very excited about that, and of course we're up to 9K, so 9,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And it goes with that promotion thing, so that's why I kind of have to edit it for YouTube purposes. So it won't be uploaded till tomorrow because I have to do a little bit of editing, and then of course I stick my stuff at For Rumble, I have a theme song. For YouTube, I have just a witch going like that, and it's just like a picture that I use all the time. So and that's because it's not copyrighted.
Right.
Otherwise I would have that theme song, but our theme song is right now it's Black Magic Woman.
Nice.
And then I also like the Devil Woman and Witchy Woman. So a lot of witchy and devil stuff in there. So I again would like to thank everybody for coming. Everybody's links would be in the description field. I'm sure Sir Tuppan has several that Matt will send me then. If you like what you heard from him, you can always hit the description field and check out his stuff. I mean, I'm so glad you came here.
Thank you.
So everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next week with Victoria, and blessed be everyone.